When it comes to greenhouse gas emissions and climate change, a lot of people and organizations are confused. There's competing frameworks, confusing regulations, and they don't know where to start. Today, we're going to be demystifying greenhouse gas emissions, explaining what a carbon ledger is, and why you don't have to be a Fortune 500 company to start tracking your environmental sustainability, your impact on the environment, and the environment's impact on you. You can't know where you're going unless you know where you're starting and how you're going to track progress to get there. And before we get to carbon ledger or tracking, we have to understand what we're tracking. What are greenhouse gas emissions? They're naturally occurring and they trap heat inside the atmosphere of the Earth. They're the reason that the Earth isn't a frozen rock. But human caused emissions from fossil fuel growth has caused more emissions and more trapped heat. Imagine it's a little bit like a blanket. You have it underneath you, it's trapping the heat inside, and just keep piling more and more blankets on. And it ends up causing the earth to trap even more heat inside. And why does that matter? Because this excess heat trapped leads to extreme weather, leads to heat waves, to droughts, to mass migration, to food and water instability. Now, there are multiple greenhouse gases. The most common is carbon. And so everything, whether it's nitrous oxide or methane, is reflected as a carbon equivalent. And so you'll see CO2e, your carbon dioxide equivalent, which reflects in your carbon ledger. Your carbon footprint is your total amount of emissions. Your carbon ledger is how you actually track that. They're broken into three scopes: scope one and two, which are about 10 to 25% of your emissions, and scope three, which are somewhere between 75 to 90%. What do those scopes mean? Imagine a house. Your scope one are your direct emissions from a water heater, from a furnace burning, from your personal vehicle. Scope two are from emissions generated from electricity that you use. Scope three is everything else. I'm going to use a legal term of causality. If not, then. If not for something you did, whether in your house or operations, those emissions wouldn't be spent. So let's use the house example again. So you're throwing a house party. If not for you, if not for the house party, the red cups wouldn't have been purchased. The packaging for the gifts wouldn't have been purchased. The transportation to and from wouldn't have been spent. And you could start to see how the scope three is such a large portion, on average 75 to 90%. Now, instead of a house, let's pretend this is a bakery. The scope one are the emissions from the oven, from the bakery delivery vehicle. Scope two are the emissions from the electricity used for that bakery. Scope three is everything else. It's the emissions to grow the wheat from the farmer, to transport that to the factory, to turn the wheat into flour, to package the flour, to transport it to the bakery, to dispose of the packaging, to bake the goods, then put it in new packaging and the customer throwing away that packaging. If not for the bakery, none of those emissions would exist. You can start to see how scope three becomes such a large portion and equates to 75 to 90%. Now, instead of a bakery, let's pretend that's a large multinational enterprise, either because of a sustainability goal or because of a regulatory requirement they have to report on their emissions. 75 to 90% of their emissions they have to report on are in their scope three. And the majority of this is made up of small and mid sized businesses. And if it's so critical, why aren't more organizations tracking their greenhouse gas emissions and keeping a carbon ledger? It's because the complexity, the difficulty from figuring out where you are and where you want to go can paralyze a lot of organizations into inaction. Large enterprises first paved the way. Imagine they're like explorers that had helicopters to first get there and paved out where and how with advanced frameworks, consultant dependent software, and large budgets. This is where we are and this is where we're going. But if you're the 99% of organizations that don't have a helicopter, that are on the ground trying to figure out where you are and where you want to go, it can feel difficult. But here's the secret: the majority of frameworks are based on the greenhouse gas protocol. The different frameworks are just different formats for how you report. And if you're a large multinational enterprise, you need the hyper specific, the helicopter view, the topographical map. You need the consultant heavy software and the projects to figure out where you are and how you're going to get there. But for the 99.9% of organizations without a helicopter that are down on the ground, you don't. And here's another secret. Even the large enterprises with the helicopter and hyper specific software and consultant dependent projects use spin based estimations for tracking their emissions, particularly in their scope 3 value chain. And if more small and mid sized businesses do the same, it improves the carbon ledgers, the accuracy, the tracking on where we actually are up and down the entire value chain. The profound irony is that many small and mid sized businesses are actually more sustainable than the large enterprises with their helicopters. They're further along because they have tighter supply chains and leaner operations. But they don't get credit for being more sustainable because they aren't tracking. They're paralyzed by figuring out where they are and where they want to go. Pick a methodology and start walking. You can't push for progress. You don't know where you are, don't know where you're going, and have no way to track how you're getting there. Use your voice to demand transparency in the organizations that you work for. Your vote to support politicians who support standardized reporting, and your wallet to support organizations and companies that are spending on reporting. My name is Lee Berry. I help organizations turn climate headlines into real world decisions. If you're ready to figure out where you are, where you want to go, and how to track your progress, let's keep walking.